The Bears, who are I thought they were. But I didn't let them off the hook. Now, if you want to crown their ass, that's fine. Then crown their ass. But I'm not going to do it. In 2012, the Bears proved me right. All year, kept talking about how this was a team that was fool's gold. They looked great against terrible teams and played poorly against good, legit teams. And when it came time to it, they were going to fall very short and leave people disappointed and scratching their heads and wondering what the hell happened. When you look at this Bears team, they started off 7-1. And primarily against bad teams, they were kicking the piss out of them. 7-1. To end up finishing 10-6 and third in the NFC North, not even make the playoffs. They've got the 20th overall pick in this upcoming April's NFL draft. They went 3-3 in the division, had a 2-6 record against teams with winning records. 2-6. And I can't believe some Bears fans are still scratching their heads wondering why Lovie Smith was fired. He deserved to be fired. I have a lot of respect for Lovie. I wish him no ill will. I was hoping that somebody was going to hire him this offseason to be a head coach. I'm sure the Dallas Cowboys or somebody else is going to hire him for the 2014 season and beyond, and he'll do fine. But it was time for a change. His number one goal of the program, number one goal, again, was not to win a Super Bowl, which is what should be the number one goal. It was to beat Green Bay. And during his 9 seasons, the Bears were 8-11 against Green Bay. So he had a losing record when that was his number one goal. Since 2009, 1-8, including a loss in the NFC Championship game to said Packers at home at Soldier Field during the 2010 season. It was time. Come on, Bear fans, use your frickin' brains here. It was time for a change. Aren't you tired of the freaking defensive coordinators that don't have a clue about the offensive side of the football? Wanstead wasn't enough for you. Jaron wasn't enough for you. Lovie's not enough for you. Good Christ. And that's the thing. For years and years, the Bears have been putrid on offense. And frankly, 2012 statistically was no different. Whether it was putrid play from their offensive line, especially in pass protection the majority of the year, whether it was putrid play calling from now former, thank God, offensive coordinator Mike Tice, or the guys before him like Mike Martz or Ron Turner or Terry Shea, remember him? That was Lovie's guy in 2004. Whether it was putrid play calling or it was putrid play by the quarterback, Jay Cutler. I cannot understand for the life of me, and I'm going to touch on this a little in this video, why there are still football fans, there are still Bear fans that treat him like he's done anything, especially in Chicago. That treat him like Jay Cutler is a franchise quarterback. No, he's not, you morons! Get it through your skull. It's been 4 years. 0 4,000-yard passing seasons. 0 30-touchdown seasons. 0, and I emphasize again, 0 improvement in his game. The only thing he's done is stayed stagnant, if not slightly regress. In terms of the offense around him, you did have a shitty offensive line, especially in the early part of the year, but towards the end of the year, they got a little bit better, at least on the pass protection side. They did. They weren't great, but they got better. They bought Cutler more time for him to still suck anyways. Matt Forte had another 1,000-yard rushing season. But for some reason, Mike Tice decided, I don't want to take my second best weapon in the passing game and utilize him in that aspect. I'm just going to try and make him a between-the-tackles runner because I'm a tool. Stupid. Cutler didn't have a lot of weapons to work with to begin with, and you're not really going to deploy his second-best pass-catching weapon? Brandon Marshall, they traded 2 third-round picks for in the offseason. He was everything you could hope for and more in his first year in Chicago. Cutler looked for him all the time because Cutler didn't have really much of anything else to throw to, and he doesn't. And Marshall delivered. Over 1,500 yards receiving. He was first-team All-Pro, and he deserved it. But the bottom line is, the offensive line still is boo-boo. The pass-catching weapons outside of Brandon Marshall are boo-boo. And part of the problem is the Bears have a quarterback who is not the type of leader of men that can make the others around him better. And when you look at Jay Cutler, you look at his performances, and I'm only going to focus on the fact of some of his performances against good teams, playoff teams or really good teams. This is a Jay Cutler that had 14 and a half games basically that he played this year. 14.5. And he still barely got over 3,000 yards passing. 19 touchdowns, 14 flipping interceptions, another 4 fumbles lost. So he had one more touchdown pass than total turnovers. That's mediocre to bad. Those are the type of numbers that they want to run Matt Castle the F out of town for in Kansas City. Yet Bears fans still, for some reason, continue to want to believe, for whatever damn reason, that Jay Cutler's the guy. The newsflash, he's not. Look at this. I got some of the numbers here, and I'll read them off. His performance against the first time against Green Bay, 126 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. Oh, that's a franchise guy. Remember the Sunday night game against Houston in that one half that he played? I don't care about the weather conditions. Don't give me that shit. 40 yards passing and 2 interceptions. The first game against Minnesota, one they actually won. 188 whole yards passing, 1 touchdown and interception. You had the Seattle game, 233 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But he came up short towards the end of the game and got outplayed late by Russell Wilson. That was his best game out of these 6 I'm going to mention by far, and he still came up short and played piss poor when it mattered. Minnesota game, the second one, the one they needed, and he lost. 260 yards passing, yes. 1 touchdown, but 2 bad picks that set up 2 early touchdowns for the Vikings. The second game against Green Bay, a team that Cutler just flat out can't play well against. 135 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So in these 6 games against teams that all went to the playoffs, 178.5 average passing yards per game, 6 total touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Jay Cutler is the type of quarterback that if you are in a smaller market, you've got some pieces around him, and he doesn't have a lot of pressure on him, he could be an effective quarterback during the regular season. But he is not a leader of men. He does not have that clutch gene. He does not step up to the moment. In fact, he shies away from the moment. Look at his performances over the years against teams with winning records and good defenses. He's terrible. And there are other quarterbacks in the league that put up better performances with similar amounts of talent around them or close to similar amounts of talent. At some point in time, the realization has to come in that if the Bears' offense is boo-boo again, which it has been for many years, and each and every single year that Jay Cutler's been there, they lack explosive big plays, both in the running game and in the passing game. They have a quarterback that makes dumb decisions and makes bad throws at the wrong times and plays small in big games. You wonder why the offense is bad. 28th in total yards, 29th in passing yards. But Jay Cutler's a franchise quarterback? Get the fuck out of here. And then we get to the defensive side of the ball. They finished 3rd in points allowed, 5th in total yards, 8th in rushing yards, had, 44 takeaways, scored like 9 or 10 defensive touchdowns, whatever the hell it was. But they did a lot of their damage, again, against shitty teams. And it got to the point where the Bears as a team were trying to rely upon the defense to score touchdowns against very good teams. And this is a defense, they were still running some cover 2. And a lot of their best players don't really fit the cover 2 all that well. Julius Peppers is not a cover 2 defensive end. You could argue that Lance Briggs, because of talent, has made it work. But in theory, he's not really a cover 2 weak side linebacker. Peanut Tillman really isn't a cover 2 corner. He's just done other things to make it work. I mean, you look at this team and you just say to yourself, you've got an offense that continues to suck. And you've got a defense that didn't really fit the scheme that they were trying to run. And oh, by the way, the majority of their talented defensive players are getting older. Peppers is like 32. Urlacher might not even be back, but even if he is, he's like 34, 35. Briggs is 30. Peanut's 31. Tim Jennings is like 29. Almost every one of their damn best players on defense are all at the 30 and above level. That's not good. I hate to tell you, Bears fans, but you should have seen it too with the defense late in the year. There were times where they needed to make big plays and make big stops, and they failed to do it. The Seattle game is a perfect example when you started to see that this defense was old and not as good as maybe you think it was. They're better statistically than they are realistically. And especially for a team that plays in a division where they have to play the Green Bay Packers twice a year, they consistently allow Green Bay to do just enough to be able to beat them because they can't match up to Green Bay's offense defensively. They just can't. The point that I'm trying to get at here to Bears fans and other football people, and this makes this video go a little longer, I don't care, is now with a new head coach, it is time to rebuild. Not try to retool on the fly, because you're not going to get it right anyways, because you still don't have the right guy at the helm at quarterback. It is time for this Bears organization to rebuild. Period. End of discussion. But I will go on more about it. And why is it time for this organization to rebuild? In large part because of their failures in, guess what? The NFL draft. It's no surprise to me that the Bears aren't that good. You want to know why? It's because routinely, year after year after year, more often than not, they get it wrong consistently in the NFL draft. Whether that be in the players that they take, their approach to how they work the draft board, the philosophy that they utilize, whatever. They just suck at it. They fail at it. Jerry Angelo was primarily a draft failure for his entire tenure. And Phil Emery, based off of 2012, isn't going to be a whole lot better. He just looks like another yokel idiot. And you can go back to his time as a player personnel director and director of college scouting in Atlanta, in Kansas City, and you could say the future doesn't look that bright when it comes to the draft for the Bears. And you would be accurate in saying so. Look at the 2008 draft. This is a perfect crystallization of the Bears drafts over the past 2+ decades. They hit it big in the second round with Matt Forte. Great pick. Phenomenal pick. Phenomenal value. Third round, Earl Bennett. Solid value in the third round. Kellen Davis. Okay value in the fifth round. But the first round pick, Chris Williams, was a total bust. Not even with the team anymore. And they passed on somebody like Brandon Albert, who was playing the same position, who got taken the next pick by Kansas City. I don't think Brandon Albert is the best left tackle in the world, but I sure as hell would have rather had Brandon Albert, and I did want him back in 2008, not fucking Chris Williams. So they got that one wrong. Then you give up 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick in Kyle Orton, to get Jay Cutler. You give up your first-round picks in 2009 and 2010. So you trade too much away to get this guy, where you could have used one of those picks to help support Jay Cutler and build around Jay Cutler and give him as many chances as he could to succeed. And then on top of that in 2009 and 2010, surprise, surprise, because they're morons in this organization, they spend 2 of their first 3 picks on the defensive side of the damn ball. Now, some of you are going to say, well, it brought you players like Major Wright and Henry Melton. Okay, who gives a shit? They weren't helping Jay Cutler. You make all this huge investment in Jay Cutler, and then you do nothing to reinforce it. Oh, Joaquin Iglesias sure was helping. Yuck, yuck. What the hell? I mean, who thinks this is the right way to run a freaking draft? Who thinks this is the right way to approach things as an organization? Only the dingbats in Chicago, in Hallis Hall, appear to think that that's the case. I mean, this is a dumbass team, the same dumbass team that traded a 2010 second-round pick to Tampa to get bust first-round pick Gaines Adams to come to him. He barely contributed in the one season he was there. Tragically passed away due to a heart condition. And that second-round pick that they traded away eventually was used by the New England Patriots to draft Rob Gronkowski. So they took a second-round pick when they already didn't have a first-round pick in 2010 and traded him to another team for a defensive end. Does the defensive end block for the quarterback? Does he catch for the quarterback? Does he run the ball for the quarterback? No! You don't do that shit, you dipshits! So you would think by 2011, Jerry Angelo would have learned his lesson. Hey, you know what? We made it to the NFC Championship game. Cutler's a joke, but you know what? We haven't done very much to help him. Our offensive line sucks. The receivers around him suck. Let's help him. So no, you spend 2 of your first 3 picks on defense, and the one offensive player you take is Gabe Karimi, a guy who clearly didn't have left tackle capability. That was your first-round pick. He was so great in 2012 that on a bad offensive line, he got demoted from his job as right tackle, only got to play at right guard because Lance Luis got hurt, and then at one point in time even got benched from there before he got put in late in the year. So then you would think with Phil Emery coming in, 2012, Obviously, offensive line's a big need. Even with getting Brandon Marshall, anybody with the brain could see, you need one or two wide receivers. You dipshits traded away Greg Olsen because your offensive coordinator, who you knew wasn't going to be there past 2011 or 2000 whatever, didn't like him. So you traded him away to Carolina for a third-round pick. So you needed tight end too. So you spent 2 of your first 3 picks on the defensive side of the ball. Taking a defensive end from Boise State who's better suited to play a 3-4 defense, that the Chicago Bears are the only team in NFL history to have never run that damn scheme, and you spend a third-round pick on a cornerback from Oregon State who didn't even play in 2011 that you were trying to convert to safety in Brandon Harden, who, guess what? Oh, who could have seen the injury history coming? He didn't even play in 2012. And Shane McClellan, he played a lot of games, but he didn't feel like it because he had 0 impact because he's out of position. And even then, the second-round pick they took, they traded up to get Alshon Jeffrey because that was a smart decision. David Terrell 2.0 if I've ever seen it. So what? He occasionally, and I mean occasionally, gets open on a deep ball. So that way what? He could commit 3 or 4 offensive pass interference penalties in a game. So that way he could disappear the rest of the game. So that way he could drop balls. That way he could run shitty routes. That way he could fail to get consistent separation from NFL defensive backs. Gee, I wonder who would have seen that. Oh, that's right. I would have seen that coming. You needed an explosive playmaker. That's not Alshon Jeffrey. That second-round pick, you invested in a tight end like Dwayne Allen. Or you could have sat there. I still like Ruben Randle better. I know he didn't do much better as a rookie than Jeffrey, but I think Randle has more explosiveness than Alshon Jeffrey. You basically ended up with a Chargers situation like they had for many years with Vincent Jackson and Malcolm Floyd. You really had 2 very, very similar receivers, and that was good to a degree, but it also limited you on offense. Well, now you got Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, 2 very, very similar receivers. So another failed draft. I'm tired of this team's failure repeatedly over the years. And don't you dare say you don't know what you're talking about. Until they prove otherwise, I'm right and they're wrong. They have no benefit of the doubt because they have a 2-decade track record of primarily failing in the freaking draft. 2 decades plus. They have no benefit of the doubt because they don't deserve it. They clearly don't understand how to evaluate talent and put together a draft board. They clearly don't understand how the NFL draft game works, and God forbid ever having to actually trade up to go get a guy you really like in the first round. They clearly don't utilize the best player available approach, which Emory demonstrated in 2012, because there was no way on God's green earth that you could tell me Shane McClellan was the best player available on the board when he wasn't even the best player available at his own frickin' position. That was somebody like Chandler Jones. And then you have guys like David DeCastro on the damn board. You have guys like Doug Martin on the damn board. You have guys like Kendall Wright on the damn board. There was no way in blue frickin' hell that Shane McClellan was the best player available. And if Phil Emery and that front office really thinks that Shane McClellan was the best player available on the board, especially based off of the defensive scheme that the Bears run that doesn't fit Shane McClellan, if they really think he was the best player available on the board, then as Bears fans, you should be terrified. Because they clearly don't get it. Clearly. And when it comes to the draft, usually the draft is a good indicator of a team's success maybe the next season, the year after that, the year after that. Like the Bears, you go back in 98, they got Parrish in the second round, Kreutz in the third round. And that's why 99, you got players like Marty Booker and Roosevelt Colvin and Warwick Holdman and Jerry Azuma. In 2000, you had Urlacher in the first round, Brown in the second round, Paul Edinger in the sixth round. By the time you got to 2001, Anthony Thomas contributed as a rookie. Even David Terrell contributed some as a rookie. It's no surprise that that Bears team, had a nice run. They got lucky, got some good breaks, but they had hit on some draft picks, and they went 13-3. But think about this. They also failed on Curtis Enos in the first round in 98, passing up on guys like Randy Moss and so many other much better players. In 99, they took Cade McNown. In 2001, they took David Terrell. You look again at the 2005-2006 Bears. Why did that team get to where they were? Well, you still had holdovers like Urlacher and Mike Brown. But then you sit there and you look in 2003. They drafted Peanut Tillman in the second round, Lance Briggs in the third round, guys like Ian Scott and Todd Johnson in the fourth round. 2004, they drafted Tommy Harris, Tank Johnson, Bernard Berry, and Nathan Vasher. Easily Angelo's best draft was 2004. So by the time you got to 2005, 2006, you were cooking. But even then, they still flopped on Cedric Benson at the 4th overall pick in 2005. And then wasted a second-round pick on Daniel Manning. Thank God they took Devin Hester with their other second-round pick in 2006. Part of the reason they did all right in 2010 and made it to the NFC Championship game was they got some big contributions out of guys like especially Matt Forte and to a lesser degree Earl Bennett in that 2010 season that they took in 2008. But you look at it, you found players over the past couple of years, the guys like Chris Conte's in the 3rd round in the 11th draft, and guys like Corey Wooten in the 4th round a couple of years ago, and Henry Melton in the 4th round a couple of years ago, and Major Wright in the 3rd round in 2010. Those are nice key core players, and it's good to have those guys, but to consistently fail in the 1st round, consistently fail in the 2nd round, and in for a couple of years' case, not even have a 1st round pick, or in 2010's case, not even have a 2nd round pick on top of that. And then you look at the 2012 draft class, and as bad as that was, it's not easy to see that unless the Bears really hit it right in this 2013 draft, this team's not going to get better. They're going to get worse before they can get better because of their failures at the draft, which is why the time is now for this team to start to totally rebuild. I can't believe they're going to try and run the same type of defensive scheme by bringing in Mel Tucker from Jacksonville because that defense was so good. Seriously, Mel Tucker? That's Mark Trestman's defensive coordinator. Oh, God. Then we talk about the head coach, Mark Trestman. An offensive-minded guy, a guy that I look at, that's a great quarterback coach, maybe a good to solid offensive mind at the NFL level, play caller. Not sure about him as a head coach. He could really work. He could really fail. At least he has some head coaching experience from his time up at the CFL. But this is a guy that still has been gone from the NFL game for several years. The NFL game could have passed him by. He could either be bringing new shit from the CFL that takes the NFL by storm, or he could be trying to run things that he ran a decade ago in Oakland that aren't going to work anymore. And you look at it, they're bringing him in, and you know this deep down because they think he has a great relationship with Jay Cutler, and he's going to get the most he can out of Jay Cutler. You're talking about a Jay Cutler that's going to be 30 this year, that's in the last year of his contract, that has done nothing in his 4 years to really legitimately show you that he is hands down the guy. He's done nothing to show you that you would want to invest in him long term as your franchise quarterback, the guy you want to ride or die with. You've got a new GM. You've got a new coach. At some point in time, you would have to think they would not want to saddle themselves and put their careers and their time in Chicago at risk riding off of the coattails of Jerry Angelo and Lovie Smith's acquisition in Jay Cutler. The Bears need to rebuild. They've got an aging defense that can't match up against certain teams. They've got an offense that stinks. Flat out stinks. This team needs a new vision. They need a new direction. You've got a new coach. You've got a newish general manager. They need to rebuild. So you're going to hear all this shit talking about in the 1st round with the 20th pick. Now the Bears could sit there, like I said before, without having the 3rd round pick that they gave away in the Brandon Marshall trade. They may try to trade down out of that 1st round pick entirely and get a 2nd and 3rd rounder. So that way they have 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. That would be the conservative, somewhat sensible, but still wrong approach for the Chicago Bears to take, in my opinion. Ultimately, to rebuild a team, it starts with the quarterback. And while you might not think that this 2013 NFL draft is the best place to find a quarterback, and you might hear all this talk about the Bears needing to address the offensive line, needing to address the tight end position, needing to address the wide receiver position, knowing these fucking idiots at Hallis Hall needing to address defense for some god unknown reason. It's time to blow things up entirely because you're not going to win with this team the way it's currently constructed. And in today's NFL, with a couple of well-placed free agent signings, 1 or 2 really good drafts, it doesn't take that long to be in contention and be really in contention. It has to start with a new quarterback, though. Because even looking at it for 2013 standpoint, Who's to even say that if you give Jay Cutler more time and more weapons, that he's going to be that much better, or that he's going to improve his play against good teams, which has traditionally been shitty? Who's to say any of that's going to change? Who's to say that he's going to step up? He's going to make the necessary mechanical adjustments. Who's to say that that's going to happen? Maybe by bringing a quarterback in, a first-round pick, you finally put his tits to the ringer. And Jay Cutler says, you know what? I'm playing for a new contract. I'm playing for a gig with somebody else. I need to go out there, and I don't want to lose my job to this guy, so I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to not lose my job to this guy. Quarterback has to be the priority in this draft. I'm sorry, Bears fans. You have to be willing and ready to accept that Jay Cutler is not the guy. Do you want to see Cutler maybe go out there this year, throw for 3,800 yards, give you a couple of moments where he looks really good, and then a couple more frustrating moments, and you really want to tie 4 or 5 more years potentially into Jay Cutler? Do you really want to do that? Are you that confident in Jay Cutler and the direction of this team with a bad offensive line, mediocre playmakers outside of Brandon Marshall and Matt Forte, actually terrible playmakers, and an aging, slightly overrated defense? You really want to hitch your wagon the next several years to Jay Cutler? I didn't fucking think so. The Bears need to go into this draft. I don't know at this moment who the guy is. If that's Matt Barkley, if that's Tyler Wilson, if that's E.J. Manuel, if they have to trade up for Mike Glennon. I don't know. But somebody in this draft will become a franchise NFL quarterback. You can book that. At least one of them. And it's up to the Bears to identify which of those guys would be most likely to do it in a Chicago Bears uniform and take that guy in the first round and not apologize for it. This team has more than a couple of needs. And they've had more than a couple of needs for many years. They're not going to address those needs in one draft or even another draft. It's time to rebuild. This whole crap of bringing in Mel Tucker to run the same defensive scheme you run before is baloney. The Bears need to get with the times and run a fucking 3-4. Sitting there running the same scheme with the same personnel, all you're going to see over the next couple of years now is the Bears are going to sit there and try and improve their offense. And maybe even if they do, by the time they get their offense to a certain level, the defense is going to decline so much that now you have to rebuild the defense anyways. That'll take a couple of years, and you're talking about 5-6 years down the fucking road before you're potentially contending for a Super Bowl. Why not completely blow it up? Why not completely take the bombs to it and be able to potentially build up both sides at the same time, and in 2 to 3 seasons be a legitimate contender? And don't tell me it's not possible. You just saw the Colts go from winning 2 games to winning 11 in 1 season. They didn't even really address the defensive side of the ball in the offseason. All they addressed was offense. And they won 11 games with a rookie quarterback. It's possible. The Redskins went from worst to first in 1 year. Basically with RG3 and a couple of other things. And they even lost some of their best players on defense. It's time for the Bears fans to wake up. It's time for the Bears coaches to wake up. It's time for that Bears front office and organization to wake up. You are not, and I repeat again, are not a Super Bowl contender and are not anywhere close to it. But you can be in a couple of seasons if you do the right things. The number one goal of the program for the Chicago Bears in this offseason, the number one goal of the program, in my humble opinion, should be drafting a quarterback in the first round and identifying that franchise guy that's going to someday lead this Bears team to the promised land. Because Jay Cutler's not it. You have to consider it a lost cause, a sunken cost at this point. After this 2013 season, you move on from him, you wish him well, and you go in a different direction. And that's that simple.